Insider, where passion meets opportunity.
Welcome to another episode of the Youth Sports Insider podcast. Glad you are listening today. Today we have a special guest, Paul Hutton from the UK. Paul, welcome to the show.
Bill, thank you so much for having me. And I think we're on opposite time scales at the moment, so it's over here. It's fairly late at night, so I apologise for the backdrop. I'm in a hotel in London, having been out with a number of clients to see some of their new products coming through in a high street retail brand. So, but it's lovely.
Well, thank you for staying awake, and hopefully maybe you have a little coffee going on there, and we won't keep you
I've got
too long.
plenty of coffees. I've got two coffees on the go.
Nice. Yeah, it's I'm pretty excited to speak to you. You have a pretty in-depth background in sports, not only as a player, but working directly with brands in multiple ways. So I understand from our earlier conversation, you were a rugby player, and that's kind of your love and your passion from rugby.
Yeah, absolutely. So my life started in rugby. I always remember going onto the rugby pitch. My father was a coach. My uncle was an international. My father's a top level rugby player as well. But my fondest memories were my father having me on his shoulders as he coached youth rugby and senior rugby.
Yeah. Fun.
So that's where my sort of love for what do we do with regards to bringing people through the regime. So yeah, absolutely. Sadly, my career was cut very short. I broke my neck playing rugby.
I thought you were just like breaking your neck. You meant kind of, but no, you literally broke your
absolutely,
neck.
yes. No, I broke C7 right at the top. Went back and played again, broke it again, went back and played again. So I've had my sort of last international game representing the RAF of all people only 6 months ago. So I think it's now finally I'm absolutely broken, getting far too old, far too unfit. So it is absolutely my time to retire from rugby.
Do they have like touch rugby? Like they have touch football, flag rugby?
Yeah, look, Bill, I am not built for touch rugby. But unless you were stopping, I don't stop too well. So
your program just to run right through and not stop, right?
That was my job. That was my briefing. We call it the gain line. You probably have it in football as well, but it's getting over that gain line. That was my job.
I will have to admit, rugby is one of the sports that I love watching and have no idea how to play it and anything that goes on. So maybe you can educate me at some point on the game. We'll watch one together and you can tell me what's going on. But I just love watching it, and I'm just picking things up as as I'm watching it, just from viewing it. But now it sounds like now you have a chance to give back and put your daughter on your shoulders, same way your dad did to you. So now you coaching, you're running a club.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's really important. And we've spoken about this before. And I've got 3 children. My eldest is 19. He's much bigger than me, so there's certainly no way he's going on my shoulders. I've got a daughter who's 15, and I call her Sport Billy because she will compete against other people in the male side of things a year above her. And I've got my daughter who at 8, who is sort of a real daddy's girl, and we went along to the local team. I was trying to extract myself from rugby because it was my life. I was spending so much time in there. Went along there, and she just turned to me and said, "Daddy, this is my happy place." I was that means I can't extract myself. And it's far more than just coaching. It's about building that community. It's about what can we offer to others. And that's where I am now.
And tell us now your professional life. You work for four agency, is that right?
Yeah.
And what do you do there, and what do they do?
I was lucky enough to take the reins. I've been in agency life. I've been in marketing for the majority of my life. I had a previous life, which it will go into over a beer, and you and I have discussed that before. But marketing is and actually activating brands, and what do brands mean for people, and actually what do people mean to brands? It's been a big pivot. So I'm lucky enough to be the managing director, established in 1963. So we're one of the longest
Wow.
standing PR and marketing agencies in Europe. And yeah, so from my perspective, I'm lucky enough to deal with brands every day. I'm lucky enough to understand what actually means to brands. So yeah, that's what I do now.
Well, we're going to dive in this particular podcast and talk about the frameworks you have around build frameworks you use to look and look at when or use when you're looking at youth sports sponsorship. So, for the just to kind of take us in that direction. Uh, can you just give us an overview of some of the brands that you've worked with and the variety of different sports sponsorships you've done?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was very lucky to be my auntie and uncle founded Umbro USA. And with the sort of nostalgic elements that we understand or remember around certain highlights of our life. And you talked about the shorts, the Umbro shorts. Everyone went
Yeah,
after the Umbro shorts, and that was a
that's
big
right.
pivotal point for Umbro USA. And we called them the sort of the board short sports. So it's more, and that's really where athleisure started its journey. So I was brought up on Umbro, as you can probably imagine. But moving through my career, I've been lucky enough to work with Nike, Nestle, most of the car brands.
Okay.
And everyone, so I'm going to be a big car brand geek. I'm not. If the car is suitable for me and if it's suitable to get me around and really do what I need it to do, then I'm not going to be sitting here saying, "No, I must have a Ferrari. It must do this. It must have this brake horsepower." But it's about what it means to the consumer. Um, Worked with Airbus and Airbus Defence and Space. We've worked with lots of consumer brands, whether that be across fashion, whether it be across sport or otherwise. But where we're there now looking is and particularly the conversation that piques my interest that we've had is what does it mean to a brand to support youth sport?
Yeah.
Um, and so from my perspective is we need to look at how do we framework that to say, okay, well, a youth sport, regardless of the level of sport or the level of what league you're in or what state you're in or in over in the UK what county we're in. It's about what does it mean to that brand, but most importantly, let's focus on what does it mean to the people who participate in that youth environment.
Hmm.
So that's something that when you reached out and I was like, yeah, do you know what, I really love that.
Yeah. One of the things that we had talked about too was, which I really loved, it's you said it very nicely. If I do a sponsorship and I'm a brand, I might be expecting something in return. If I do a donation, it's just a donation. And I'm not expecting anything in return. Uh, and both live and can live within youth sports. You can go after donations. My club team just got. I have a basketball club team, and someone donated a shooting machine to us.
Mm,
It's great.
mm.
Uh, and but what we've done sponsorships before with the local insurance agent, realtors, um, and what was storage company, where you rent a garage,
Yeah,
right, store all your
yeah.
extra stuff, and that was very successful, and we got the money for that to support our efforts and what we were doing in our community. So I'd love to just really just dive into your frameworks and how you approach sponsorship in youth sports.
Yeah, I think the word sponsorship, if we sort of go back to when we'd be at school or college, and we'd take a sponsorship form in. It would be, I'm going to run 10K, or I'm going to do this. Will you sponsor me? Now, the expectations around sponsorship is that in order to pay that £10 or $10,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to run the 10K, or
Yeah.
you're going to jump out of some. There's an expectation you will do something in order to get this. I've always said, what are you going to do in order to warrant me giving you that £10 or $10?
Mm-hmm.
So I've often said, and I said to you a couple of times, Bill, is it's very often not sponsorship, it's a donation.
Mm-hmm.
So what can we do, and what can we look at? And so start with the framework is, you guys refer to it as CSR, corporate social responsibility.
Yeah.
Big terminology over here in Europe is ESG, so environmental social governance. Very, very similar. And so you've got your corporate, and then you've got your social. And actually, when we talk about social, it's about bringing communities together to give something back. So when the most important part of our community is our youth, because they are shaping the future. They are what we in marketing, in you and I are both from a marketing background.
Yeah.
They are what we call in the marketing terms, they are our active activators. So they're the ones who influence, my daughter will influence what I buy based on her, Dad, you can't do that because you do this.
Oh my
It
God.
means so.
That sounds like my
So
daughter. Yeah.
absolutely, we govern kids, and we're ultimately governed by our daughters. But what we look at is, what does it actually mean? So I'll build a framework, particularly for the local team, with another team up here, North Walsham. They're a national level side, but we also look at what does it actually mean for those who sponsor us, and give something back. We've got to give something back to them, and engage them, make them part of that community.
So let's dive into what that engagement means. So let's
Mm.
pick Nike. I'm Nike. Um, I'm I'm sponsoring your rugby team, or I'm looking at
Yep.
sponsoring your rugby team. Uh, w-
Well, thankfully, England's sponsored by Umbro now, but we won't go
okay, well, we can talk
there.
about Umbro. Yeah,
Yeah. No, no,
Umbro,
no,
it
no,
doesn't
no.
matter. Yeah, yeah.
Let's stick with Nike. Stick with
Okay,
Nike. I've got to
okay.
stay
Yeah.
neutral here.
Okay. So well, I'm looking at I have a proposal in front of me. What should I expect
Mm.
to see on that proposal from you? Your club does what? This is what. And if I'm understanding this correctly, you're saying, Nike, if you give me £10, I'm gonna I'm going to send an email to all of my families in my club. Is that, and again, a very high level generic
Yeah.
example, but is that what you're saying as far as that's what I should be expecting, or that's what the brand should be expecting back?
No, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. That's what most will expect that to mean. Um, because actually, if we look at outbound marketing for that,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about email database there.
Yeah.
Um, what does that £10 mean that it's going out there? Yeah, it's great for the brand equity, but actually, in the proposals that we put to Nike, is that let's forget about outbound brand equity. Let's forget about the outbound reach. Let's focus on what it means for these kids. Let's focus on what it means for the community. And if we can say, okay, Nike, you put £10 into us, um, and we've got we're running a Sunday morning or Saturday morning soccer club or football club or um, baseball club, and we've got 200 kids turning up here. We've got
Mm-hmm.
200 kids that have got their family turning up in an area that are seeing Nike as that positive light and that positive brand who are
Mm-hmm.
helping that. So get rid of the outbound, get rid of the traditional, what does this mean from our brand engagement,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
focus on, actually, we are doing this. So then we look at our CSR and ESG. So the corporates within Nike can say,
Mm-hmm.
you know what, from a CSR or ESG policy, we've engaged these individuals and we've given them this. So we can report upon that which is your in ESG is the governance side of things.
Hmm.
But we're giving these brands an opportunity to say we have actually genuinely done something in a social environment. So
Hmm.
that's really where it is, and I think that's a big shift is moving away from what does it mean for me as a brand? You know, what are my outbound report KPIs
Right, KPIs, yeah.
to actually focusing on let's give you something back and saying we're really doing something authentic because we've all seen the CSR greenwashing, green flushing, ESG greenwashing, green flushing, but let's take that back and say this is authentic because you can come and see the guys and girls enjoying their youth sport together.
Yeah,
They can build insulated. So one of the biggest things in mental health is building insulation in team environments. They're
yeah,
building
yeah.
insulated relationships. And that's so important for brands nowadays because they're lost on how to report on that.
So it's interesting. So if again going back to the Nike, the it so Nike could give equipment, right? Clothes, uniforms, right, as part of that, or they could give money,
Mhm.
correct? Right? So is it different if it's well, if it's clothes versus I'm going to write you a check to sponsor
Yeah,
your team?
yeah, no difference at all.
Mhm.
Apart from that, if you're giving a non-tangible, which is money or a
Hmm.
check, I'd always recommend that the teams actually say, give back to the corporates and say, this is what we're going to spend it on. These are how this is going to benefit our club. Whereas if you
Hmm.
give uniforms or kit, as we refer to in the UK, well, there's the kit. You know, you can see what you've given.
Right.
Over in the UK, and something I'm quite passionate about is running foundations. So
Yeah. Right.
within
Hmm.
club and running foundations in clubs for those who can't afford the kit or
Yeah.
can't afford the membership fees.
Yeah.
Well, let's help you do that and let's get you involved because we mentioned something. A dear friend of mine, Ken Cowan, launched something called the School of Hard Knocks.
Oh yeah,
And
that's right. Yeah.
School of Hard Knocks is really interesting. Is became quite a successful TV series over here um, around rugby and those who are sort of on the peripheral of maybe becoming um, getting into the criminal justice system, as we call it, and who haven't had that guidance, who haven't had the opportunity. Well, we're saying, well, we'll put our arm around you, and if you think you're tough and you want to do this, well, let's give you a bit of a pathway. That's where it transforms into a real outcome. So whether or not it's money, whether or not it's uniforms, or whether or not it's pathways, that's really important. As long as we can report back to those who are supporting us as to actually what we're going to do.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, and a side note, I don't know why I didn't bring this up to you before, but so I live in the town where St. Mary's College is, and they're the long, big time rugby program. You know, they finish one or two in an NCAA. So um, you see these guys doing the first time I ever saw them, they were doing this was during, I'm assuming, tryouts, uh, doing bear crawls up about a mile long of this beautiful sidewalk up to the college, and I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, oh, that's the rugby team, they're bear crawling.
Yeah.
Um, those guys work hard. Uh, anyway, so that's my again, another reason to get my interest, piquing my interest in rugby. It's becoming a big sport in our tiny little town of Moraga, California. But let's again, I really just want to dive into this and your thoughts around, your ESG or CSR and the idea of how this is relating to youth sports sponsorship. Okay, so now let's flip the script. I'm a club, okay,
Mm,
and I need money to support my club. Okay, as a marketer, one avenue is I could go to the advertising sponsorship budget, but I know there's also the CSR budgets, right?
mm,
So
mm.
who do I, as you know, at any big company, if it's Nike or if it's Umbro or if it's, whatever, Adidas, etc. You name it. Who do I approach?
Who you speak to? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So stakeholder identification is going to be key. You know,
Hmm.
who's got the driver, who wants to be involved, and it comes down to dialogue. It comes down to, and again, I'll share with you a framework around the ESG, and really just identifying different stakeholders within there whose objectives. You know, what is their exam question for their success in their role, and it's answering that exam question. So just asking them, understand what is your objective around CSR? What's your objective around ESG? And a lot will say, well,
Mm.
actually, it is, and I keep focusing on ESG, very similar. It was, you know, we all refer to CSR over here still, but well, we're going to reduce the amount of plastic coffee cups we use. We're going to reduce the amount of waste we've got. We've got solar panels. We've got wind turbines. We're promoting people to have electric vehicles because of tax incentives. All of this sort of stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. That's your environmental part, but without a social element, and
Mm-hmm.
social starts from grassroots. Without that social element, you're not going to activate the greater environmental part. Because you know we're all being called out. We're seeing, and certainly in Europe and over here, we're seeing people are claiming what they're doing from a environmental element, but we're struggling to see actually what does that actually mean. But without the core base of social, so identifying the stakeholders is going to be a key. And I
Hmm.
think, you know, I'll talk to anyone all day long about how do we add. So we use something called TIE. So you trace the people. You then investigate, are they the right people to speak to, or you eliminate it? You know, they're not the right people to speak to, so
Yeah.
don't keep barking off. Um, it's just making sure that those who are involved there, so the sponsorship will undoubtedly be aware of CSR or ESG. And maybe it's for clubs to educate them, saying, have you ever thought of actually you could, it may not be your sponsorship pot, but it may be your CSR pot. So this could be a great opportunity for you in your
Right.
sponsorship. Say, hello, Mr. ESG or CSR. Would you support us in this? Because I think the outcomes on your reporting will be tenfold over what you're actually trying to do in a very difficult manner.
Yeah. Interesting. So, and and then I guess even the other aspect too is not only within the company itself, the other stakeholder in all of this too is the agencies, just like you, right? I could approach you and do a pitch, right? That's the other, piece of it too, which
Yeah, yeah,
from a club venue perspective, it's a lot of work to find out the right people and then, one, just to have anybody pick up the phone anymore, right? Or answer an email, right? A lot of back and forth. And now you add, you have your brand budgets, maybe you have an advertising budgets, your CSR budgets, and then you have your agency, your traditional agency, your media agency, your PR agency. We've gotten money for sponsorships from, a PR agency, which happened to be our biggest sponsor. And I wouldn't have thought of that originally, right? A few years ago, that's where we would, have or get sponsorships from. I don't know if you have any thoughts on there. It really wasn't a question, but it takes a lot of work.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. And look, I've today, I've been very lucky. I've had a walk and talk and a learn with one of our high street brands. So we represent a high street brand, a little bit like Walmart.
Okay.
I've been to their buyer session today,
Hmm.
where and this particular buyer session was all around plants, and there's all around, what do they stock in their garden centers. And for me, when we talk about the environmental elements there, is my team are out there going, actually, yeah, you want to stop this here, but let's do something together. Let's do something around improving. There's a big conversation around bees today.
Hmm.
What
Hmm.
plants are going to promote bees.
Yeah.
So we're an agency then going out to them saying, you know, you could support this, and this. I then come back to the hotel, looked at some of the dialogues that are going around my team, and we've got one to run a charity golf day with a soccer player, but actually it all comes back to how do we support young people who are underprivileged or maybe suffering from a disease. I've come back to a, a scheme where they're asking to adopt a station for our rail network. All of these is where we're going to say, do you know, we can help that. It's about making the right connections. But I think pulling it back to there and regardless, and I don't know the size of the organizations that you guys work with, but even if you've got only 200 kids in a youth sports, it's in that 200 kids, there's 400 adults involved in circa. So
Yeah.
those 400 adults have got connections too. So leveraging that connection and saying, who do you know who works or may work in an organization, and educating your audience, your engaged audience, because there's no one more engaged than parents. If
Right.
your kids are doing something, there's no one more engaged. So engage that audience and say, what would you do? What about you? And just involve them in that process, because people can become very passionate when their kids are having fun or the kids are getting something out in the majority, or even if the parents aren't, those around that child are. You know,
Yeah.
you're saying, I'm here as a sports coach. I'm going to do the very best for anyone involved in my sports organization. So it's identifying the key individuals there. Working with agencies, yeah, you're coming across agencies, and but what you'll find is that many people engaged in my team have gone through a couple of steps before, and actually I'd love to break that down and just say, how can we do that? But the people who actually break through and sort of cut out a lot of the friction in that journey are the
Hmm.
people who have got primary, secondary, or tertiary connections, and say, do you know about this?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's a really key point: is use your network as it is.
Yeah, that's the second time that, in 2 days that's come up in doing, talking with professionals like yourself. One of the things, the theme that I'm hearing is, well, if you're looking for sports sponsorships for your club or your team, first talk to the parents. Who do they work for? Are they at an agency? Are they at a big brand? Are they maybe they're the local realtor or insurance agent that would be interested, right? Or dealership was one of them I heard yesterday, or grocery store, right? So start there and network and see if you can, because that's a warm lead, right? So to speak. So the other
Yeah,
thought. Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah. Well, you talk about the automotive or a dealership.
Mhm.
I've got a friend who you can probably tell by my stature. I love meat and I love steak and I love barbecue. Um, but I've got a very good friend who runs a butcher's business,
Okay.
and he's going, "Oh, look, we have these peaks and troughs in our
Mm,
so summer we get all the people who are barbecuing. Winter we get some people who are wanting to do a typical Sunday roast. In the UK, it's a very traditional meal. Christmas we get your turkeys, etc.
yeah.
But we get peaks and troughs." He said, "How can I get more of this?" And I said, "Well, let's look at rugby, for example. I have 500 kids turn up on a Sunday morning,
Okay. Wow.
but someone's got to bring them there. So why don't we just do a big advertising campaign across there? Have you got your Sunday roast, or have you got
Yeah.
your barbecue?" And he goes, why have we not thought about this before? It's just thinking outside the box.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
love, the automotive. We've done that as well. Family parks a couple of family cars there and saying we sponsor this rugby club. Here's a
Mm,
couple of family cars that actually you can transport half. You call them minivans, right?
yeah.
Well, we're really cool, but 7 seaters. You can
Yeah.
transport half a rugby team.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Exactly. Well, the one I heard about uh, I thought this was a great activation. There was a dealership sponsored the youth program, and every time someone came in for a test drive, they gave $200 back to the youth program. They had oh gosh, I'd have to go back in the notes, but they had a couple hundred test drives. Uh, so it got people in the door, got them to test drive a car. The youth sports organization benefited from that. So I thought that was a brilliant way of giving back to the community and served the dealership as well by getting traffic, right? Same thing with your butcher. My mind went because I love meat. I grew up in Wisconsin, so uh, is have a barbecue outside, right? Of the smell of the meat, activate more senses, see it, right? Not just put a banner up, but man, one day we're gonna have this big barbecue, right? Here's some
And a brisket,
coupons,
yeah, yeah.
you know.
Just going back to that automotive, when you
Yeah.
talk about the test drives, and it'd be really interesting to see. So talk about CPA's, cost per acquisition of
Hmm.
a test drive. How much does it cost us to acquire someone to come into, and automotive? There's a very, very, very short time period of taking someone from a Ford to a Mazda.
Mm.
You've got a Ford, you're going to be in a Ford, you're going to be in a Ford, you're going to be in a Ford. Actually, it's a really short time period to translate them away from Ford to Mazda. Now, that CPA of a brand transformation into Ford to Mazda is huge. It is
Yeah.
massive. But it'd be really interesting for, that case study you give me there is what was the CPA for all of those test drives? How much do you normally pay for a test drive? And how much did you pay to sponsor that youth sports? Well,
Hmm.
there's your CPA. You've just cut your CPA by thousands and thousands of percent.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and that's a good way to look at it too. Yeah, another thing that popped in my head as you were talking about this, and curious to get your thoughts. Okay, so if I look at again, or just even from a m- yeah, measurement standpoint, education standpoint to our listeners is if well, depending on where the dollars are pulled from, they're going to have triggers, right?
Hmm.
So if it's pulled from a traditional advertising budget, it's going to be about, okay, well, KPIs, right? From a uh, maybe the CSR ESG budget, it's going to be a different set of triggers. And maybe for you as an agency, it's going to be another set of triggers that's going to be that you're going to A, measure, but also I need to speak specific language to you. And that is my job as, let's call it the salesperson, is to figure out the language we use. Like you just educated, I never thought about the ESG and CSR model, but now I know that you're big on that, right? So if I would ever come to pitch you, right, I would definitely approach the youth sponsorship from that angle. So
Yeah.
I'm in my head, speaking of models, I'm thinking, oh, shoot, okay. So if this is the language you use, X, Y, and Z, if you're going after this budget, if you're going after this budget, this is the language you use. Does that
Correct. So
make sense? Does
yeah,
that,
100%. So KPIs are easy.
yeah.
And I say they're easy. Looking at can we account for I've got X amount of leads out of this, I've got X amount of engagements.
Mm-hmm.
My followers on social have gone up by X. When we talk about CSR, we often talk about impacts. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a recognized accounting
Yeah.
protocol, the
Mm-hmm.
triple P.
Yep.
So that
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
people, planet, and profit.
Yep.
You put your people first, your planet first, and then your profits come.
Yeah.
So it's just identifying what the metrics are that people are saying, okay, I can account for the impact there. One of the hardest things in marketing is how do we measure brand equity? We could
Right.
put all sorts of ratios in place, but taking away some KPIs, straightforward. Have you hit this? No, yes, no, yes. When we talk about CSR, it's how do we report on that? So we can quite easily say we have donated $10. I keep saying £10, $10. And out of that, we have touched the community of this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, being able to do that, we have supported 100 kids. what does that then mean? We have then made sure that those 100 kids have got a means to achieve something as a social enterprise or working together. So it's when you talk to the different, and it goes back to who are we talking to, and you know, if I was talking about pharmaceutical marketing, you know, the buyers aren't the people who actually use the pharmaceuticals. The decision makers aren't the people
Right.
who are the buyers. But we've got all of these different organizations, oh, sorry, stakeholders to talk to and build that
Yeah.
rhetoric around
Yeah.
and
Right.
talk. We just have to get it right. Yeah, and what is right? It's talking about authenticity. You know, we don't try too hard is probably what I'm trying to say. Don't try too hard to have a script on this is the outcome, this is what you're going to get. So we are building a community environment. You
Mm,
need support community environments.
yeah.
We've got an option for you to do that. Now we can. What do you need us to report to you back on? You know,
Mm-hmm.
how are the kids done? Well, actually, it's not about how the kids. You know, if they finish eighth in the league, or if they finish top in the league, or they get promoted, it's not about that. It's about what does it actually mean from a community engagement point of view. So I think
Yeah,
it's
that's
really
yeah.
important just to don't overplay it. Don't put too much emphasis on we need to give you facts and figures, but you've contributed to this, and the CSR is yeah, you've contributed,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
that's interesting. You know, one of the things we talk about in ROI too, and how we measure the, let's call it the impact,
mm,
is we look at sideline hours, right?
mm-hmm,
How many, or yeah, what's the amount of sideline hours? Because we know we're, you know, the brands should be speaking to the parents. The parents are the decision makers, the buyers, right? And maybe a lot of times, at least in the States, you know, the mom of the household, you know, controls the 80% of the
mm,
spending, right?
mm-hmm,
So, you know, that's a tangible number. So, for example, how it would work is this, and what we say is, okay, youth sports basketball game. There's 3 games, guaranteed 3 games in a tournament. Okay, if you go on and you win your bracket, you know there might be a fourth or a fifth, but we'll say average of 3. Each game is an hour long, right? So that's 3 hours. An engaged and parent is sitting on the sidelines potential, you know, they're potentially to see your brand. Now I know there's other places you can put your brand, you know, so but let's just imagine there's a brand on the jersey, there's a brand, you know, on a wall, right? Maybe on a side of the backboard, maybe even on the floor, right? And
mm-hmm.
it's you know, so we look at that sideline hours and we kind of use that generically because then there's, you know, I can send an email, right? It's not they're not technically on the sideline, but the concept of there's this engaged group who
Mm,
has paid money to play this sport and is there's no other time that they wanted, you know. I look back on my kid's sport career, it's like if I, you know, my son's now in college and he played baseball and I would give anything to drive what I used to complain about, 3 hours away on a rainy day, no idea if they were going to play the tournament or not until you got there. And I used to complain all along. I'm like, I can't believe we have to drive 3 hours. It's raining, but I'd give anything for one more game, right?
yeah, yeah,
And that's how, you know, we're so invested in our kids' activities, in this case, the youth sports. So to me, that is worth a lot more than the emails that I get in my inbox
yeah.
that I can just easily skip over and delete. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we you know the majority of us are invested in our kids. Full stop. You know,
Hmm.
you bring kids into the world, you invested into the kids, and you then got what we refer to in the neuroscience and consumer psychology as a sunk cost effect. So you've
Mm-hmm.
traveled that three hours, you've invested into that. You're then saying, I need to make this the best I can do. I'm sitting there, you've got a captive audience.
Yep. Yeah.
So you've got your sunk costs, you've got your captive audience. And then actually, suddenly, you've got a positive character. So I'll talk about positive characters in a negative playbook. Now, pretty much
Yeah.
we turn the news on, and it's all about negativity. You know what's going on. We've talked. You asked me earlier, why are so many millionaires leaving the
Yeah.
UK at the moment? We
It's
won't
different
go into
podcast,
that at the
different
moment.
day, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But you know, we're all seeing this negative playbook. But suddenly the brands, we've got the sunk cost effects. We've travelled. We're fully invested because we've travelled. But also we started that journey of travelling because we're so fully invested in our children.
Hmm.
But then suddenly we've got this positive character who's helped us facilitate this, whether it be on the court logo, whether it be on the jerseys, whatever that is.
Wherever it is, yeah.
We're suddenly saying, we keep going back to the big tick brand, but it could be a pink widget brand.
Yeah.
That pink widget brand is that positive character for me because I'm captive. I've got a sunk cost. I'm fully invested in my children, and suddenly you're there and you've helped me facilitate this. There's the brand equity in that is unquestionable.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
my thoughts.
Yeah,
You
no,
know,
and I appreciate that. And yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And and I guess that's why I think U Sports is a great investment. I bought all kinds of media before, and this one in particular, and somebody might who's listening to this might argue, there's others, and there probably is, but I'm biased. There's that parent, grandparent sitting in the audience, they're there with a smile on their face watching their child play. And if a brand can associate with that happiness and that happy place in the sideline hours, right? That's a huge win for all involved, the sport team, the parent, and the brand. Um, to me, that's kind of the holy grail of what I would want to be associated with. Not negativity, not worried about, even on YouTube, I watch a ton of content on YouTube. You don't know what your ad is where it's gonna be placed next to, right? It could be positive and you can control some of that, but as you know, you've done it too, so not always a happy
yeah,
environment.
yeah, and I think sort of, we go back to you know, my fond memories of sitting on my father's shoulders as he's coaching a senior rugby team, or
Yeah.
um, he'll quite often. Do you remember the old white line wash that they used to use to paint the white lines on
Yeah,
TV?
yeah, yeah.
I disappeared off his shoulders, and he turned around, and there I'm sitting in the bucket of white paint. Um, and then so
Fun.
back in the day, just chucked me in the shower, bath, or whatever it was. And
Yeah,
but those are memories, and
yeah.
memories are things that you'll never take away from someone. And
Hmm.
if brands can associate to memories, they are trigger points. And we're not talking about cutting edge marketing techniques. We're talking about neuroscience
No.
here.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
neuroscience, and so the brain cognitive, and whether it be a protein or whether it be proteins affect the electric activity and all this sort of stuff. But it's making sure those memories are recalls. Now you're going back to the shorts, the ombre
yeah,
shorts.
yeah.
Had to get the brand in there, but the ombre shorts, that's a memory for you.
Yes.
And so from a brand equity point of view, that's fantastic.
Hmm.
So we need to constantly work on these things together. And youth sports is a way to activate, and the fact that you and I share a passion for youth sports and what does it actually mean for the youth. We've both got sons who are sort of 19, 20, 21,
Hmm.
and they will never sit on our shoulders again. I'm fairly strong, right? But my son will never be able to sit on my.
I can't do that anymore. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but those are things that we're looking back and go, oh, how do we replicate that? We can replicate that for others.
That's
We
right.
can
That's
be
a good point. Yeah. Yeah. And I coach and I still get that thrill, right? I was walking into the gym the other day. We were doing tryouts for our club team right now. And somebody I didn't meet who was trying out for our team said, "Hey, how you doing?" And I said, "Oh, great tryouts today." I said, "I'm a little nervous. This is coming from me as the coach." And
okay.
they turned to me and like, "What?" because I thought that was just the kids that get nervous. I said, no, I get butterflies in my stomach every single game. And
Yeah,
they're like,
yeah.
really? I thought that goes away. And I'm like, no, because I care so much. So like, did I teach them everything that they need to know? Or, did I forget? Did I, how to do
That's
X or how to do
passion.
Y? What are they going to throw? What's the defense going to throw at us today? And it's like all that stuff goes through my head. And, that's the passion of sports.
How absolutely spot on. It's passion that we as past sports people, we can share that to that, and actually those who've got that to share are a great opportunity for brands to say. So again, something I'll always talk about is active activators for
Mm.
brands.
Yeah. Hmm.
You and I are active activators. We don't realize that you look at the hoarding, you look at the sponsorship around the pitch or the stadium,
Yeah.
you don't realize you are that brand's active activator. So you're flying that flag. You're then
Hmm.
that positive activator. You're then that positive character in a negative playbook that we talk about.
Yeah.
And so positive character and negative play again goes back to neuroscience. It's a positive character is 3 times more effective
Mm.
in any environment because negative playbook only uses 2 parts of the brain to talk about negativity. Positivity is 3 parts. So driving that forward is really important for us.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, hey, so let's put some corners on all of this,
Hmm.
and let's look at it from two approaches. First, let's talk to the brand who's interested in sponsoring a youth team. What maybe 2 or 3 points that you could give them as they're evaluating the youth sports sponsorship space?
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point. I think from a brand point of view, are they in the right place? Geographically, do they align? Um, can I authentically say to my shareholders that actually these guys are really driving forward and want to engage, want to support? And that's a fairly easy question to answer for the sports clubs. The majority of them will be able to say, yeah, we're doing it for the right place, but also to be able to and engage with the sports clubs. Say, this is what we want to achieve. This is what our shareholders want to do. What are you doing that could meet our needs?
Mm, mm,
What is
hmm.
it that actually can really talk and deliver the dialogue? And if we look at digital marketing, for example, my head of digital will say, okay, well, I can produce you a 160-page report saying these are the different metrics that we've produced, but you're only going to want to read one page.
Yeah.
So go back to the top sheet. What is the top sheet going to look like?
Mm,
What
hmm.
can we do to build that top sheet together? So we will only deliver a top sheet, but we'll give you that 160-page
Right,
report.
right.
So it's that top sheet every Monday morning. What's that top sheet look like for you from a digital marketing perspective? But there's 160 pages behind it. So so
Yeah.
it is about making sure that we framework that, build it together. Sport is a
Hmm.
team. I say sports a team thing. Even if you're playing singles and tennis, you've still got a team behind you in order to play singles and tennis. So it's a
Yeah.
team effort. So that's a big thing. So look at the pillars around how do we build that as a team.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And okay, so let's take the other side then, the club, tournament director, they're approaching brands. What tips would you have for them if they're looking for sponsorship dollars to help support their activities?
Yeah, and again, I think I'll share with you some of the frameworks, the key pillars of frameworks around that. But it is going back to let's make sure that if we're asking for sponsorship, you're either going to be able to deliver a clear KPIs and what that sponsorship looks like.
Hmm.
Go back to let's look at it's like the blue ocean strategy.
Yeah.
Everyone's after sponsorship, but let's just look outside of that and say, okay, well, we understand that this may not be sponsorship because you're not going to get X thousands of viewers watching the NBA, or
Hmm.
you're not going to get X amount of brand equity coming into your website. But what you will get is authentic communications around this is we're pulling communities together. So we're looking at that blue ocean. So just making sure that we'll put the framework around the blue ocean. What does it mean from an environmental point of view, but most importantly, the social. The corporate social
Hmm.
responsibility is that social element. What does it mean for that community?
And if
But
I
again,
could,
I'm quite happy to share a framework for you.
oh, that'd be great. And I can put it in the show notes if you have that. That'd
Yeah,
be
absolutely.
awesome. I think if I sum it all up in this discussion, which has been amazing, and we really appreciate your time and having you on, your wealth of knowledge, uh, is really just like figure out the right stakeholders within the organization, talk their language, and don't approach, if I'm a brand or if I'm a club, don't always approach it. Don't approach sponsorship from, well, you give me these dollars and I will give this to you back. Strong, hard KPIs. It doesn't always have to be that way. And that's this. Did I kind of sum? Was that a good summary of
Yeah,
our last
100%.
hour?
I,
Okay.
I, yeah, I think saying this, go back to sponsorship, go back to what does sponsorship actually mean, and
Hmm.
if you go through a sponsorship deal, there'll be so many different targets to hit. Are we going to achieve this? Well, if we don't achieve it, you're not going to get your sponsorship renewed. The majority of youth sports, because it is not, it may not have the same viewer levels, it may not have the same engagement. We're often saying, "Can you sponsor us?" And I'm talking from the lowest level right the way through to a level where you're sort of breaking through. And people going, "Well, it's not really a sponsorship, is it? It's a donation." We need
Hmm.
to overcome
Hmm.
that. We need to think outside that. But going back to the T, so what I said about TIE, so you trace the individuals,
Yeah.
you implicate them. Are they the right people to speak to? And then you
Hmm.
engaging with them in the way that they understand. So if you're engaging with them in language they don't understand, or saying, "No, we'll do this," they go, you completely lost me there. That's not what we
Right.
do. It's just understanding their policy.
Yeah,
A
yeah,
little
yeah,
bit
that
of
makes
homework
sense.
there. But the best way is through your network that you've got, which is parents.
Which is parents. Yeah. No, again, I think that's the key to all to key to start because they're warm. They're warm. At least I could sit down with you if you were on my club team and say, look, we need help, right? We need money to do X. I don't know, let's say again, you work at a grocery store. You might be the clerk at the grocery store. You have nothing to do with the budget, but the manager's hot button is, CSR. Oh, hey, this is how you would approach that, right? So just having those conversations within your own organization to start is probably a good place. Anything else that I we didn't talk about that you think is, worthy of a quick conversation to round all of this out?
No, look, I think um, we could probably open a can of worms, and
Yeah,
but
probably.
it's about staying authentic to, as a sports
Yeah,
sports leader. It's about staying authentic to what you want to achieve, and vice versa for those who are looking to sponsor. It's about making sure that you're committed. You want to drive that forward, but always giving back. And recognizing you may not always recognize what you're giving back or what you're achieving, but you are
mhm,
achieving something.
yeah,
And I think that's really important to, it's about forward progression. And we talk in rugby about the gain line. As long as you keep moving forward, you're going to win the game.
yeah,
And but from that perspective, coming together, I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but the parents, and you build lifelong insulated, and the word insulated is so important. Insulated relationships, and just focus on that relationship, because
yeah.
you're there to support each other.
And yeah, and the last thing to that point, which is, you as a sport parent, you're sitting on the sidelines for hours with the other sports parents, so that becomes your community, and you know, it's it's not like you're not talking in the stands, right? There's conversations happening, and there's maybe after the sport you're hanging out and going to a restaurant with the kids and hanging out with them, or you've become, you've made friends with, the parents and so it really does become this community that is a good breeding ground for brands to get involved in. So.
100%, 100%.
Paul, thank you so much. This has been inspirational, informative. I really, truly appreciate the time and staying up late to speak to us all the way from the UK. Thank you so much. And if someone wants to reach out to you, follow you, um, where can they learn more about what you guys are doing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm an avid LinkedIn user. I love LinkedIn. That's moving forward. It's one of the social medias that has sort of stand the test of time.
Yeah,
Um, I'm a commercial guy. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. But yeah, please look me up, Paul Hutton, for agency, for as in FOUR. Happy to talk to anyone. It's again, being a sportsman, it's about coming together and say, look, have you thought about doing this?
yeah.
Always do that.
Paul, thank you. And hopefully we can have you back on the show sometime to share some more knowledge with our audience.
Bill, it's been a pleasure. Really, really appreciate the invite.
Thank you.